Italy, 1944, 1447 hours. German pilots laughed over the radio waves. Schwarze Flieger, black flyers. They called the new American squadron with red-painted tails, circling over Anzio. The Luftwaffe veterans had faced Americans before. These would be no different. They laughed until 8 Bf-109s dove from 23,000 feet. Until those red-tailed P-51 Mustangs didn't scatter. Until 5 German fighters spiraled down in flames within 8 minutes. The laughter stopped. The radio went silent. Then came the transmission. Achtung, these are not ordinary Americans. Stay to hear the intercepted order that proved the Red Tails changed aerial combat doctrine forever. The 302nd Fighter Group had arrived at Ramitelli Airfield in southern Italy 3 months earlier. The transport planes touched down on a dirt strip carved from wheat fields. Colonel Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. stepped onto Italian soil, knowing his men faced 2 enemies, the Luftwaffe in the air and prejudice on the ground. He walked the flight line as ground crews painted the tails of their P-47 Thunderbolts bright red. The choice wasn't random. Every other fighter group used squadron colors, blue for the 31st, yellow for the 52nd, checkered patterns for the 325th. Davis wanted his pilots visible from 10 miles away. "Let them see us coming," he told his operations officer. "Let everyone know who we are." These men had trained for 2 years at Tuskegee Army Airfield in Alabama. They'd studied aerodynamics in segregated classrooms, while white cadets learned the same equations 50 feet away. They'd eaten in segregated mess halls, the food identical but the tables separate. They'd proven themselves in primary trainers, then basic trainers, then advanced trainers, passing every test, exceeding every standard. Now they would fly in integrated skies where German bullets didn't check skin color. The irony wasn't lost on them. They could die for a country that wouldn't let them eat at the same lunch counter. White bomber crews initially refused their escort. The morning briefing at the 2nd Bombardment Group was tense. A B-17 pilot stood up. "Sir, we'll take our chances alone rather than fly with colored pilots." The briefing officer responded, "You'll take the escort assigned." That's an order. The bomber crews would change their minds within a week, but that morning, prejudice flew heavier than any bomb load. Captain Charles McGee gathered his flight before their first long-range mission. The ready room smelled of aviation fuel and cigarette smoke. Maps covered every wall: Italy, Austria, southern Germany. Red pins marked flak concentrations. Blue pins showed fighter bases. McGee stood before his pilots, all of them knowing what the white bomber crews thought of them. "Gentlemen, those bomber crews don't trust us yet. They think we'll abandon them. So here's what we do. We stick to those flying fortresses like glue. No glory hunting. No chasing fighters into clouds. No victory rolls over the field. Stay with the bombers. I don't care if a Bf-109 flies right past your nose with its belly exposed. Stay with the bombers. Even if Goering himself shows up in a gold-plated Focke-Wulf. Stay with the bombers." This went against every fighter pilot instinct. Pursuit pilots lived to pursue. They trained to attack, to hunt, to destroy. McGee was asking them to be shepherds, not wolves. At 08:32 on June 2nd, 1944, 24 Thunderbolts lifted off from Ramitelli. The mission: escort B-17s of the 2nd Bombardment Group hitting rail yards north of Rome. The morning air was clear, visibility unlimited. German radar picked them up at 8:47 as they crossed the coast. At Luftwaffe Control Center South, the plotting board updated. A German controller noted the new contacts: 24 fighters, heading 320, Angels 20. The duty officer studied the plot. "Vector Gruppen 2 and 3 from Aviano. Let's see what these red-tailed novices can do." The German flight leader was Hauptmann Friedrich Müller, a 22 Victory ace who'd flown since Poland. He'd shot down Spitfires over the Channel, Hurricanes over Africa, P-38s over Sicily. He studied the approaching formation through his canopy. The red tails maintained perfect spacing, 1,000 feet between elements, stepped up in tactical layers from 19,000 to 22,000 feet. Textbook formation. But he'd seen Americans fly textbook before. They always broke when bounced. The hunt was about to begin. Miller checked his instruments. Oil pressure good. Manifold pressure optimal. Ammunition counters full. 200 rounds for the nose cannon, 500 per machine gun. He waggled his wings. 7 BF-109s tucked in tight. He rolled inverted at 23,000 feet and pulled through. The dive began. Speed building, 350, 380, 420 mph. The red-tailed fighters grew larger in his windscreen. Any second now they would break. They always broke. In Red Flight Leader, Lieutenant Willie Ashley Jr. saw them coming. 8 grey shapes dropping like hawks. His hand moved to the stick. Every nerve screamed to break right to meet them head-on. He could see the lead German's yellow nose, the black crosses on the wings. 2,000 yards. 1,500 yards. 1,000 yards. Ashley forced his hand steady. Red Flight, hold formation. Stay with the bombers. His wingman's voice crackled. Red Leader, they're right on us. Ashley responded, hold, hold, hold. The German leader pulled up 2,000 feet above, confused. American fighters always took the bait. Always. He'd done this 50 times. He radioed his wingman. They refuse engagement. What are they doing? His wingman, equally puzzled, responded, Herr Hauptmann, they're just sitting there. Miller made a decision. Attack the bombers directly. Force them to move. The Germans rolled into their attack run. That's when 4 red-tailed thunderbolts finally broke, not away from the bombers, but into a precise weave directly through the German attack path. It wasn't a pursuit. It was a wall. Ashley fired a 3-second burst. The convergence was perfect. 6 streams of 50 caliber bullets met at exactly 300 yards. The lead BF-109's left wing folded like paper. The aircraft snap-rolled and fell. Lieutenant Charles Bailey caught the second Messerschmitt climbing away. The German pilot tried a standard escape, a climbing spiral to the left. Bailey had studied this maneuver at Tuskegee. Page 247 of the combat manual. Counter, lead the turn, fire when the target's wings go level. He squeezed the trigger. The German fighter's fuel tank erupted. Orange flame engulfed the cockpit. The pilot bailed out, his parachute catching fire as it deployed. The remaining attackers scattered, completely disrupted. Not one had reached the bombers. The formation of flying fortresses droned on, untouched, their gunners having never fired a shot. In the lead B-17, the pilot who'd refused colored escorts that morning watched the red-tailed fighters reform perfectly around his formation. He keyed his intercom. Navigator, make a note. Those colored boys can fly. Word spread through the Luftwaffe quickly. That evening at Aviano, Müller filed his report. He'd never filed one like it. Enemy fighters exhibited unusual discipline. They refused to pursue despite repeated provocations. Recommend revised tactics for engaging this unit. The intelligence officer reading it assumed Müller was making excuses for losing 2 wingmen. He'd learn differently soon enough. By July, the 322nd received new aircraft, North American P-51D Mustangs, fresh from the factory. The crew chiefs worked through the night, transforming them. First, the standard olive drab paint came off. Then came primer. Then bright red from the tip of the rudder to the leading edge of the vertical stabilizer. Some crew chiefs added personal touches, a thin white stripe at the border, shark teeth on the nose. But always, always, that red tail visible from 10 miles away. These machines changed everything. The P-47 Thunderbolt was a bruiser, heavy, tough, devastating in a dive. The P-51D was a dancer, nimble, fast, with range that seemed impossible. With drop tanks, they could fly to Berlin and back. 1,650 miles. The bomber crews called them Little Friends. The 302nd's Little Friends wore red. In mid-July, Captain Joseph Ellsbury proved what the Red Tails could do with proper equipment. The mission was escorting B-24 Liberators to oil refineries in the Ploesti sector, Romania, the most heavily defended target in Europe. Ellsbury led Yellow Flight as they crossed the Danube. The landscape below was scarred from previous raids. Burned refineries, cratered fields, the wreckage of dozens of bombers. At 10:47, Ellsbury spotted them, 3 Focke-Wulf 190s climbing from the southwest. They were setting up a head-on pass at the lead box of Liberators. Standard Luftwaffe tactic. Scatter the formation. Pick off stragglers. Ellsbury didn't chase. He calculated angles in his head. Speed, distance, closure rate. The Focke-Wulfs would reach attack position in 40 seconds. He had 30 to get there first. Yellow flight, follow my lead. We're going to thread the needle. Ellsbury rolled left, dove 2,000 feet, then pulled up hard. The maneuver put him directly in the German attack path. The Focke-Wulf leader saw him coming and fired early, a desperation burst at 500 yards. The rounds went wide. Ellsbury waited. 300 yards, 250 yards. At 200 yards he fired. The API rounds sparkled as they hit. The Focke-Wulf's engine seized. Oil sprayed across the windscreen. The pilot rolled inverted and bailed out. The second Focke-Wulf tried to zoom climb, pulling up at a 70-degree angle, trading speed for altitude. It was a classic escape maneuver. Against a P-47, it might have worked. But Ellsbury's Mustang, lighter and with a better power-to-weight ratio, followed him up. At 18,000 feet, the Germans stalled. For 2 seconds, the Focke-Wulf hung motionless. Ellsbury's rounds found the fuel tank behind the cockpit. The explosion was visible from 20 miles away. The third Focke-Wulf dove for the deck. Ellsbury let him go. His fuel gauge showed he'd burned 12 gallons in 90 seconds of combat. He had enough to get home, but not if he chased. He rejoined the bombers. 3 victories in 4 minutes, and he'd never been more than 2,000 yards from his assigned position. The bomber crews had watched the entire engagement. That night, for the first time, B-24 crews bought drinks for the red-tail pilots at the officers' club. Coming up, you'll hear the exact transmission when German controllers ordered their pilots to abort attacks rather than engage the red tails in equal numbers. German intelligence took notice. At Luftwaffe headquarters in Berlin, analysts compiled reports from multiple sectors. The pattern was consistent. This new American unit flew differently. An intercepted communication from August revealed new tactical guidance. The transmission, decoded by Ultra, read, "Units engaging red-tailed escorts report unusual tactics. Fighters refuse separation from bomber formations. Recommend numerical superiority before engagement." A handwritten note in the margin added, "These are not typical American cowboys." By September 1944, the 332nd had flown over 200 bomber escort missions. The statistics were unprecedented. While other fighter groups in the 15th Air Force averaged 46 bombers lost to enemy fighters, the 332nd had lost 27, and most of those in missions where they provided only partial escort. On missions they escorted from start to finish, losses approached 0. The white bomber crews, who had refused their escort, now requested them specifically. "Give us the red tails" became a common radio call from B-17 groups heading into heavily defended airspace. The requests weren't just about statistics. It was about what bomber crews saw. Other fighter escorts would chase targets of opportunity. They'd pursue enemy fighters into clouds, leaving bombers exposed. They'd claim victories while liberators burned. The red tails were different. Bombardiers reported seeing red-tailed Mustangs hold position even while taking flak damage. Tailgunners watched them absorb punishment rather than abandon their posts. Radio operators heard them calling out threats to each other, coordinating coverage. Always someone watching every angle. Lieutenant Lee Archer embodied the unit's philosophy. On October 12th, while escorting bombers to Budapest, his flight encountered 12 Bf-109s positioning for a head-on attack. The German formation was perfect. 3 flights of 4 stepped up in echelon. They'd approach at a combined closure rate of 600 mm, fire at 200 yards, then zoom past before escorts could react. It was a tactic that had destroyed dozens of bombers. Archer watched them come. His wingman called out, "Flight leader, 12 bandits, 12 o'clock high," closing fast. Standard fighter doctrine said to engage immediately, turn into them, scatter their formation, claim victories. Archer held back. "I see them. Hold position," he counted in his head. 5 seconds, 4, 3. At 2 seconds, he acted. Archer didn't attack the fighters. He dove to a point 500 yards in front of the lead bomber and fired. not at any target, into empty space. But that space was where the Germans would be in 3 seconds. His wingman understood immediately and followed suit. They created a curtain of tracers the Germans had to fly through. 3 Messerschmitts broke off immediately. 2 others altered course slightly, throwing off their aim. Only one continued straight. That one Archer took. He rolled, inverted, pulled through, and came up behind the German as he passed beneath. It was a 90-degree deflection shot, one of the hardest in aerial combat. The pilot has to calculate the target's speed, distance, and angle, then fire where the target will be, not where it is. Archer had practiced this shot 1,000 times. The burst was perfect. The Bf-109's canopy shattered. The aircraft nosed over and went straight down. The bombers flew on untouched. In the lead B-17, the bombardier was able to maintain his run. The bombs fell exactly on target, a rail junction that had been missed 3 times before. That night, Archer was credited with 1 kill. The 3 pilots he'd forced to break off weren't counted. The bombing accuracy he'd preserved wasn't measured. But the bomber crews knew. They knew who brought them home. The Mustangs gave the 382nd another advantage, range to hit targets deep in the Reich. On November 16th, Colonel Davis led 48 red-tailed fighters to Brux, Czechoslovakia, a 1,600-mile round trip that pushed even the Mustangs' limits. They took off in darkness, stars still visible. The crew chiefs had worked all night preparing the aircraft. Each Mustang carried 2 75-gallon drop tanks. That was 150 gallons of extra fuel, 900 pounds of additional weight that would affect every aspect of flight performance. At 06:00 they crossed the Adriatic. The sun rose behind them, painting the red tails orange in the dawn light. By 7:30 they were over Austria. The Alps rose beneath them, peaks shrouded in clouds. Ice formed on the wings. The temperature at 25,000 feet was -40 degrees. The pilots flew in heated suits, but their breath still froze on the inside of their oxygen masks. German radar tracked them from the moment they crossed into Reich airspace. At Luftwaffe Control Center Prague, the duty officer couldn't believe the plot. Fighters? At that range? Impossible. Must be a mistake. But the plots kept coming, consistent, accurate. American fighters 800 miles from their base and still coming. He scrambled every available interceptor. The German defenders couldn't believe fighters had come so far. They assumed the Americans would be desperate, low on fuel, looking to disengage quickly. The first group of Bf-109s approached in standard attack formation, 12 aircraft in 3 flights of 4. They expected the Americans to run. Instead, the red tails turned into them aggressively. The lead German pilot hesitated, confused. That hesitation cost him. Captain Luke Weathers caught him in a climbing turn. The Bf-109 pilot was good. He kept his turns tight, varying his radius to throw off Weathers' aim. But Weathers had studied energy management at Tuskegee. He knew that in a climbing turn, the fighter on the inside has the advantage if he manages his speed correctly. He kept his Mustang just above stall speed, cutting inside the German's turn. When the Bf-109's wings filled his gun sight, he fired. The burst was short, 20 rounds. 15 hit. The German fighter's coolant system exploded. White vapor streamed from the cowling. The engine seized within seconds. Weathers' fuel gauge read 1/4. He had perhaps 12 minutes of combat time at full throttle, then a 700-mile flight home. He used 8 minutes. He shot down a second Bf-109 that made the mistake of trying to outdive a Mustang. Then he reformed with his flight and headed home. They landed at Ramitelli with less than 30 gallons in their tanks. Some had less than 20. But they'd proven American fighters could strike anywhere in the Reich. The discipline held even in chaos. During a December mission to Augsburg, the scene below was Dante's Inferno. Oil refineries burned, sending black smoke to 15,000 feet. Black bursts filled the sky like deadly popcorn. The bomber stream stretched for 8 miles, 200 heavy bombers in formation. 40 German fighters rose to meet them, taking off from emergency strips hidden in forests. Standard procedure would spread the 48 escorting red tails along the entire bomber formation. Davis made a different choice. He concentrated 36 fighters around the lead bombardment group, the Pathfinders. These B-17s carried the Norden bomb sights and the best bombardiers. If they went down, the entire mission failed. The remaining 12 red tails he stationed as high cover, watching for jets. German fighters swarmed the rear bombers, expecting the escorts to race back. Radio calls from the trailing groups were desperate. Red tail leader, we're under heavy attack. Need assistance. Davis's response was calm. Maintain position. Protect the Pathfinders. It went against every instinct. They could hear the bomber gunners calling out targets, hear the stress in their voices. But Davis knew, if the Pathfinders didn't mark the target, 200 bombers would drop their loads blindly. The lead group dropped their markers accurately. Bright red flares fell through the smoke, marking the refinery's critical cracking towers. The following groups, despite taking losses, could bomb effectively. Post-mission analysis showed this tactical choice saved 14 bombers that would have missed their targets without proper marking. The refinery was destroyed. It never produced another gallon of aviation fuel. On January 15, 1945, the 392nd encountered Mi-262 jets for the first time. Lieutenant William Thomas was leading Blue Flight at 28,000 feet when he saw them. Two high-speed jet shadows moving faster than anything he'd ever seen. His first thought was that his eyes were playing tricks. No aircraft moved that fast. Then the shapes turned toward the bombers, and he knew they were real. The jets approached at over 500 Nm. The Mustang's maximum speed was 437 mph. The physics were simple. The red tails couldn't catch them. But Thomas remembered something his crew chief, Sergeant Raymond Parks, had told him. Lieutenant, that Mustang will do things the manual says it can't. You just have to ask right. And sometimes you have to ask rough. Thomas waited until the lead jet committed to its attack run. The German pilot was confident. He knew the Americans couldn't match his speed. He flew straight and level, lining up on a straggling B-17. That was his mistake. Thomas pushed his Mustang into a 60-degree dive. The airspeed indicator climbed past the red line. 480, 490, 500 meters per hour. The aircraft shook violently. The control stick felt like it weighed 50 pounds. Rivets popped on the wing surface. Thomas fired at where the jet would be, not where it was. The lead compute was all instinct and experience. He pressed the trigger. 6 streams of 50 caliber rounds arced through the sky. The burst missed by 10 feet. The jet pilot, startled that an American had even attempted the shot, broke off his attack. The B-17 lived. Thomas pulled out of his dive at 15,000 feet, his aircraft creaking from the stress. He'd proven the red tails wouldn't run from any opponent, even the Luftwaffe's wonder weapons. The respect from the Luftwaffe became explicit. Radio intercepts from February painted a clear picture. German controllers no longer referred to the red tails with derision. A transmission intercepted on February 8th. Large formation approaching from south. Escort appears to be the red-tailed unit. Recommend avoiding engagement unless tactical advantage is assured. Another from February 15th. Red-tail fighters confirmed in Sector 7. All units exercise extreme caution. In the ready rooms of German fighter bases, the briefings had changed. A captured document from JG-77 showed their tactical guidance. The Negro fighter pilots of the 382nd show unusual discipline. They do not pursue individual victories. They do not abandon bomber formations. Standard separation tactics are ineffective. Recommended approach, high-speed slashing attacks with immediate disengagement. Do not attempt prolonged combat. By March, the Red Tails had a reputation that transcended prejudice. When the 15th Air Force planned its most dangerous mission, attacking Berlin in daylight, they assigned the 332nd to escort the lead wing. It was an acknowledgement of their excellence. 64 red-tailed Mustangs would protect the Pathfinder bombers through the most heavily defended airspace on Earth. The mission briefing was sobering. Intelligence estimated 200 German fighters in the Berlin area. Flak batteries numbered over 1,000 guns. The weather forecast was poor, clouds from 10,000 to 20,000 feet, limiting visibility. The target was the Daimler-Benz factory, producing engines for German fighters. If the pathfinders didn't mark it accurately, the mission would fail. March 24th, 1945, 04 hours. The red-tailed Mustang sat on the flight line, engines warming. Ground crews made final checks. Crew Chief Marcellus Smith walked the line of Captain Roscoe Brown's aircraft. He checked every rivet, every control surface. He'd been up all night preparing this machine. As Brown climbed into the cockpit, Smith grabbed his shoulder. "Captain, she's running perfect. You bring her back with some victory marks to paint." The mission launched at 0530. By 11 they crossed into German airspace. The Luftwaffe response was massive. Fighters rose from every field, Bf-109s, FW-190s, and jets. The German defenders had learned. They didn't attack the red-tailed escorts directly. Instead, they flowed around them like water, seeking easier targets. The radio crackled with German transmissions. Lieutenant Robert Friend, the 302nd's German-speaking intelligence officer, translated in real time. "Achtung! Rote Schwänze in Sektor 3. Nicht angreifen ohne Höhenvorteil und Überzahl." Then in English for the American pilots, "Red tails in Sector 3. Do not engage without altitude and numerical advantage." Then more urgently, "Jets vectoring to Sector 3. Red tails are in Sector 3. Abort. Repeat, abort and reposition." It was during this mission that history was made. 3 Me-262 jets dove from 30,000 feet toward the Pathfinder bombers. They came out of the sun, using cloud cover, approaching at 540 meters. In any other circumstance, they would have been unstoppable. But Captain Roscoe Brown had been watching that particular cloud formation for 5 minutes. Something about it bothered him. When the jets emerged, he was ready. Brown didn't chase the jet. He went where it had to be 4 seconds later. The German pilot, overconfident in his speed advantage, held his line toward the lead bomber. Brown's angle was perfect. As the jet crossed his nose, he fired. The deflection was nearly 90 degrees. The range was 300 yards. The burst was 4 seconds, longer than recommended, but Brown knew he'd only get one chance. The rounds found their mark. The Me-262's left engine exploded. The asymmetric thrust sent the jet into an uncontrollable roll. The pilot ejected, his parachute deploying just 500 feet above the ground. Lieutenant Earl Lane engaged the second jet, using the same tactics. His rounds damaged the jet's hydraulics. It limped away, trailing smoke. Charles Brantley fired at the third, forcing it to break off its attack. 3 of Germany's most advanced fighters had been neutralized by pilots flying propeller-driven aircraft. The Pathfinder bombers reached their IP, initial point, intact. The bombardier in the lead B-17 had a clear view of the target. The Norden bombsight was perfectly calibrated. At 11:47, he pressed the release. 20,000 pounds of high explosives fell toward the Daimler-Benz factory. The following groups, seeing the leader's bomb's impact, dropped on the same point. The factory was obliterated. It would never produce another fighter engine. Lieutenant Earl Lane watched 12 FW-190s bypass his formation entirely, heading for bombers 10 miles back. Every instinct screamed to pursue. Those bombers were Americans too. They needed help. But Lane held position. "Stay with the bombers," his assigned bombers. That discipline meant that while other groups claimed more aerial victories, the 352nd brought their specific charges home alive. Charles McGee, now a major with 136 combat missions, had perfected what pilots called the red tail weave. The maneuver was elegant in its simplicity. Flights of 4 would scissors continuously over the bombers, maintaining a pattern that created overlapping fields of fire. No German fighter could penetrate without facing at least 8 guns from 2 different angles. The pattern required absolute precision. Each pilot had to maintain exact spacing and timing. If one pilot broke sequence to chase a target, the entire defense collapsed. On March 31st, the 332nd flew its longest mission yet, escorting bombers 1,800 miles to tank factories near Prague. The round trip would take 8 hours. They'd be over enemy territory for 5 of those hours. Each Mustang carried maximum fuel, approximately 265 gallons internal, plus 2 110-gallon drop tanks. That was 485 gallons total, weighing nearly 3,000 pounds. Luftwaffe intelligence had tracked them from takeoff. A German radar operator in Austria reported American fighter formation bearing 320, Angels 25. Estimate 60-plus aircraft. The operations officer checked his range charts. Fighters? At that distance? They'll never make it back. He was about to learn otherwise. German fighters waited at maximum altitude, planning to attack when the American fuel reserves were lowest. They'd calculated that by Prague, the Mustangs would have perhaps 5 minutes of combat fuel before having to turn for home. They hadn't accounted for the 300 seconds discipline. The red tails had been flying at maximum efficiency, proper mixture, optimal altitude, perfect formation to reduce drag. Lieutenant Robert Williams spotted them first, 15 Bf-109s at 35,000 feet, contrails streaming behind them like white fingers. The German fighters held every advantage, altitude, position, numbers. Williams called it out. Bandits 2 o'clock high, 15 plus. Major Roberts responded, I see them. All flights maintain escort position. Do not pursue if they break off. The Germans dove from 35,000 feet. At that altitude, the air was so thin that the Mustangs struggled to climb. Ice formed on the windscreens. The engines labored, superchargers screaming. At 32,000 feet, visibility dropped to almost nothing. Williams was flying by instruments and instinct. His wingman, Lieutenant Samuel Curtis, called out positions. Lead bandit rolling left. Now diving. He's lining up on the lead box. Williams couldn't see clearly, but he could see traces. He fired where his instinct told him the German would be. The bright lines of his tracers intersected with a shadow in the mist. An explosion lit up his windscreen. A Bf-109 disintegrating 200 feet away. The remaining Germans, unnerved by the accurate fire through clouds, broke off their attack. The bombers reached Prague intact. They dropped their loads accurately. The tank factory was destroyed, along with 43 completed Panther tanks ready for shipment to the front. The mission was a complete success, but the flight home tested every ounce of discipline the Red Tails possessed. Fuel was critical. They'd used more than calculated fighting at high altitude. Some pilots had less than 40 gallons remaining with 400 miles to go. Major Roberts made the call. All flights reduced to minimum cruise. Maintain 210 indicated. Lean mixture to limit. If your engine coughs, enrichen slightly and hold. They flew back in perfect formation, engines barely above idle. Everyone watching their fuel gauges dropped toward empty. Lieutenant Carl Carey's engine quit 50 miles from base. He'd pushed his mixture too lean. The prop windmilled uselessly. He was at 15,000 feet. The Mustang could glide far enough to reach the field, barely. His wingman, Lieutenant Walter Palmer, made a decision that violated every regulation. Carl, get tight on my wing. I mean tight. Overlap wings if you have to. Palmer knew that flying in the leader's wingtip vortex would give Carey extra lift, extending his glide. They flew the last 40 miles with their wingtips. Inches apart, any turbulence could cause a collision. Palmer held his aircraft rock steady. Carey focused on nothing but maintaining position. They crossed the field boundary at 500 feet. Carey's wheels touched down with the last of his momentum. He rolled to a stop at the end of the runway, his tanks bone dry. Palmer landed behind him with 5 gallons remaining. The Germans adapted their tactics specifically for the Red Tails. A captured Luftwaffe document from April 1945 outlined their final guidance. The Negro fighter pilots demonstrate combat discipline superior to other American units. They will not pursue individual victories. They maintain bomber escort regardless of provocation. Recommended tactics: only engage with 3-1 numerical superiority. Execute high-speed attacks from maximum altitude. Disengage immediately. Do not attempt sustained combat. This from an Air Force that had ruled European skies since 1939. They'd terrorized London, devastated Warsaw, dominated the Mediterranean. Now they were writing doctrine on how to avoid a group of pilots who 18 months earlier weren't even allowed to fly combat missions. By April 1945, the numbers told an undeniable story. The 332nd Fighter Group had flown over 1,500 missions, logging more than 15,000 individual sorties. They'd destroyed 112 enemy aircraft in aerial combat, with another 150 destroyed on the ground during strafing runs. They'd shot down 3 Me-262 jets, a feat managed by only a handful of Allied units. They'd earned 96 Distinguished Flying Crosses, 14 Bronze Stars, 8 Purple Hearts, and 3 Distinguished Unit Citations. Lee Archer ended the war with 4 confirmed victories, with strong evidence for a 5th that was never officially credited. When asked about it years later, he said, "I would have loved to be recognized as an ace. But you know what? Every bomber crew we brought home safe was a victory. Those 10 men in each B-17, they had mothers, wives, children. We gave them back to their families. That's worth more than any personal score." On April 26, 1945, the 392nd flew what would be their final escort mission to Salzburg. The war was clearly ending. German resistance was collapsing. But the Luftwaffe still had fuel for one more defense. 4 red-tailed Mustangs, led by Captain Walter Palmer, encountered 8 Bf-109s rising from a camouflage strip cut into a forest. The German pilots were teenagers, 16, 17 years old. Their training had been rushed, perhaps 50 hours total. They flew aircraft cobbled together from salvaged parts, but they attacked with desperate courage, knowing their homeland was defeated, their future uncertain. They came straight in, no tactics, no formation, just raw determination. Palmer could have destroyed them all. His flight had position, experience, and better aircraft. Instead, he fired warning bursts, forcing them to scatter. When one German teenager pressed his attack anyway, Palmer put a burst just in front of his nose, close enough that the boy could see the traces. The young pilot broke off, diving for the deck. Palmer let him go. All 8 German boys survived. 5 days later, the war in Europe ended. The final statistics spoke volumes. The 382nd Fighter Group ended the war with the lowest bomber loss rate in the 15th Air Force, 27 bombers lost to enemy fighters on missions they escorted from start to finish. While other fighter groups averaged 46 bomber losses, the Red Tails' discipline had saved 19 additional bomber crews, nearly 200 American lives. These weren't just numbers. They were fathers, sons, brothers, who came home because a group of black pilots refused to abandon their posts, no matter what. The Luftwaffe, which had dismissed them as Schwarze Flieger in 1944, ended the war with explicit instructions to avoid engagement. A captured German pilot, Oberleutnant Hans Müller, told interrogators, "We could see those red tails from 10 kilometers away. Our commanders told us to find other targets." They were not like other American fighters. They would not leave the bombers. It was frustrating, but also impressive. Hermann Goering, head of the Luftwaffe, reportedly said after the war, "Your red-tailed boys gave us hell. When my pilots reported red tails in a sector, they would request permission to engage other groups instead." This was not cowardice, it was practical. Those pilots had something to prove, and they proved it every day. Colonel Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., who would later become America's first black general, summarized their achievement in a speech to the group. "Gentlemen, we fought 2 wars, one against fascism abroad, another against racism at home. We won the first through excellence. We began to win the second the same way. Every mission you flew, every bomber you protected, every time you held position when glory beckoned, you proved that excellence has no color." The transformation was complete. Where German pilots had once laughed over their radios at the inferior black pilots, they now transmitted warnings. Achtung! Red tails in Sector 5. Avoid engagement. Where American bomber crews had refused their escort, they now requested them by name. "Control, this is Able Leader. Request Red Tail escort for tomorrow's mission to Munich. In the officers' club at Ramitelli, a hand-painted sign hung over the bar. It read, "Stay with the bombers." It was their motto, their discipline, their vindication. They hadn't flown for personal glory. They hadn't chased victory counts. They had done something harder. They had sacrificed individual achievement for collective excellence. And in doing so, they had achieved something greater than any ace tally. The silence on those German radio frequencies told the real story. The laughter had stopped. The mockery had ended. In its place was respect, earned at 25,000 feet, proven in combat, undeniable even to enemies. The Red Tails hadn't just protected bombers. They had shattered a myth about racial superiority, using the most objective measure possible: survival in aerial combat. On May 8, 1945, victory in Europe was declared. The 322nd Fighter Group assembled on the flight line at Ramitelli. Their Mustangs sat in perfect rows, red tails gleaming in the Italian sun. Colonel Davis addressed them one last time. "Gentlemen, you have proven that the antidote to prejudice is excellence. You have shown that courage knows no color. You have demonstrated that given the opportunity, any American can serve with distinction. The war is over, but your victory will echo through history." He was right. The Red Tails had won more than a military campaign. They had won a battle for dignity, fought at 400 miles per hour, settled with 50 caliber arguments, proven beyond dispute. Every red tail painted on every Mustang had been a declaration. Every bomber brought home had been evidence. Every German transmission warning against engagement had been testimony. The last laugh belonged to them.